Well, hey there. You've stumbled upon the intersection of internet quandaries and psychological insight. Welcome to Veritas Views on AITA, where the quirks of the internet meet the expertise of Veritas Psychology Partners.
Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Michael McBride. I'm joined by our dynamic duo of psychologists.
Hi, I'm Dr. Gayle MacBride, and the Robin to my Batman is Dr. Dan Kessler, who is joining us here today. Like I put myself in the lead.
I will accept that designation. Great to be here again with a couple of my favorite folks, Gayle and Michael. As we piece together, Michael, you always bring us interesting stuff, and what I like about this is that I frequently start out with a position or a thought immediately, and then as we talk about it, sometimes the internet convinces me more frequently. Dr. McBride convinces me that maybe my tack isn't quite right on this. These are fun conversations to have. So
you say you come out of the gate with a boom and a pow and a smack and a bam.
Again, with the superhero stuff.
Michael, can you fix that in post? All right, let's go.
Welcome, both of you. For any of the newbies who are like, what did I just stumble upon? What we're going to do is I have found a scenario out there on the internet that somebody has posted, and they've asked essentially, who is the asshole here? And that's what Drs. Kessler and McBride hope to determine today. Also, if you're new, stick around through the end. There's some kind of quirky bonus conversation. And this time around, I'm going to be the one asking the question. So that'll be different. But for now, neither Gayle nor Dan have read this. I haven't shared the post with them ahead of time. I haven't told them anything about it. So let's go. Today's post, the headline is nice and short and sweet, which is, am I the asshole for not offering an open bar at my wedding?
No. Okay.
Boom, pow, bam.
Again, we're I was joking about fixing that in post earlier, but I'm not so sure.
No, not so much. Come on, it's fun.
All right. We both automatically said no, but there's probably more.
Yeah, I'll read the rest.
I'm going to say no.
You should read the rest, please. Help us out here. So, otherwise, it is the world's shortest podcast.
Yeah,
which I know people like quick, but this is ridiculous. So you need to help us stretch this out a little.
All right. My fiance and my wedding invites have started arriving. Along with invites is a few things that we felt we should outline before guests arrive to the reception. We have decided to not include an open bar. I come from an alcoholic heavy family and simply don't feel comfortable being around people who are drinking heavily. Instead, my fiance and I have decided to have a drink ticket-like service instead. With that service, we've been able to customize how we want alcoholic beverages being handled at our reception, and the venue says this kind of service happens all the time there. It was, in fact, their suggestion, so I didn't think of this as a big deal. With the invitations was a card with the expectations one is to expect from the ceremony and the reception. I didn't want to shock people when they arrived, so I figured the cards would be a nice, classy heads up for our guests. The drink service bit of the card said essentially that alcoholic drinks were limited to 2 per of age guests. The tickets are non-transferable, and like other beverages offered, would need to be ordered from your seat at your assigned table. Drinks were also to be enjoyed at your assigned table. I've been called a lot of rude things after family, both sides, and friends are receiving their cards. My fiance has as well, but a little less so. The most common thing being bridezilla. But I did have an uncle reach out to me and say that I'm being an asshole for trying to spoil the fun of a wedding reception. The response has been mostly negative and has been from all sides of the family and friends, and now my head is swirling as I try to figure out what to do. So, am I an asshole because I've set my reception up like this and not offering an open bar instead?
So this is interesting. Thank you for reading that. That the original poster was a male and that the female partner was getting fewer comments. But as you ended, I'm hearing this as the OP is probably the bride, and she's getting more pushback and being called bridezilla, whereas the groom's family is not pushing back. I just feel like I need to have some clarity in my brain. Is that what you got from this as well?
That is correct. Yeah.
Okay. And so bride and groom have collaborated on a set of expectations around alcohol consumption at this event and have imposed a lot of rules, a lot of rigidity around this.
See, so at the beginning here,
Mhm.
as she's describing this, and OP is female, correct? As she's describing it, you want to have an open bar at your wedding, have an open bar. You want to only serve beer and wine at your wedding, serve beer and wine. You want to have a cash bar at your wedding. It's your wedding. You decide. And I think people often get wrapped around the axle around why aren't they paying for liquor? Why are they paying for liquor? What are they doing? I think
Right.
any way that you choose to do that at your personal wedding is your damn business. And then she crosses a line.
Yeah.
And where I think she crosses the line is in trying to tell people what they can do. And that's the problem here. Is
Yes.
it's not I choose whatever I want to do at my wedding, my business. I don't get to necessarily tell you. What do you think, Gail?
I like what you said there, and I think for me it hits the discussion I often have with clients around boundaries versus requests. And I
Yeah.
think she's getting some pushback here because there are so many requests attached to this and being presented as if they are boundaries. And they're not.
Mhm.
The boundary is we're not paying for an open bar. We will pay for 2 drinks per individual of age. Alcoholic drinks. And that's the boundary. That is what is
Yep.
within the poster's control.
Perfectly
And
fine.
beyond that, it is a request. Perhaps we would request that you stay at your seat to help minimize whatever, although I do think that's extreme, but she is overreaching and seeming overly controlling by sort of demanding or setting a rule that guests need to consume that alcoholic beverage at their seat.
Yeah,
This is problematic. Overreaching is the best word I have for it.
I think that's a good word. I'm uncomfortable with the bridezilla designation. And I do, I mean, I sort of I get her fear.
Absolutely.
We talked in the past about
I've talked about this in my therapy office a number of times with this exact fear.
right, and we've talked about and we've talked about where we should allow anxiety to guide us and where we should push back against anxiety.
Mhm.
And she doesn't want someone to get drunk and act like an asshole at her wedding. I get that. Who wants that? That would be awful. And given her family, it sounds like that's happened. And she doesn't want that to be part of her wedding.
Mhm.
I get it.
Yeah.
And certainly by saying, I think it's totally legit to say, whereas no open bar, there's no cash bar, everyone's going to get 2 drink tickets, use them as you want. Please consume alcohol in moderation. We really would appreciate that. I am fine with that.
Absolutely.
You can only drink at your seat. You can only order from the wait staff. The drink tickets are non-transferable. Like, too much.
The invitation had been drinks can be ordered at your seat from the wait staff. Fine. Because that's
Okay.
maybe the rule of
Yeah,
the
that's fair.
venue. But
That's
again,
fair.
telling you have to stay seated while you consume your drink. This is now bringing a different level to this
Yeah.
this party. I mean, a wedding reception is a party, and I completely agree with you. Nobody needs to be absolutely shit-faced at a wedding, and bride and grooms don't need to worry about how you're going to handle your alcohol or, Uncle Tony who's going to get out of hand and start throwing fists and and I hear this, right? I mean, people are
Yeah.
like, I got a person designated that if shit starts going down, they're calling the cops because that's
Yeah.
the kind of family I have. And I
Yeah.
get it, and it's unfortunate, and we can't not invite Uncle Tony, and I understand that too. But I think you're just setting up this night for so much tension
Yeah.
because if Uncle Tony wants to get lit, he's gonna pregame. He's gonna bring his own booze. He's gonna hide it. He is going to find a way to ruin your night, regardless of how many rules that you put into place. So lightening that up a lot of times will allow an evening to go more smoothly because you don't set out those alarm bells ahead of time. I do love that they're trying to give their guests a heads up. I think they just put too many rules in place.
Right. No, we're on the same page here, and I've certainly talked to people who've led, like, yeah, they only served whatever at the wedding and I knew they were gonna do it, so I brought a flask.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't bring a flask to a wedding.
Don't do it.
Unless it's like a family thing that people do. And every wedding handle things differently. I've been to weddings where there was no alcohol served or a cash bar. I've been to weddings where, like, I went to a wedding recently where there was, there was at a winery, so there was wine. Great, wonderful, terrific. But I've also been to weddings where there was massive amounts of alcohol and everything. I'm sorry, I'm prattling on here. I just think that, like, the bride and groom get to choose how they serve the alcohol, but there also need to be some reasonable guardrails around not telling people what they can and can't do with themselves. Like, that's their choice.
And,
you can kick them out.
One night is not going to create sobriety or healthy alcohol use in another individual.
No.
So, at that point, you leave you make sure that people have Ubers, or you leave the taxi number, and you make sure people are safe leaving your venue, because that becomes what you're responsible for. I mean, that's the other piece of this, right? Is, as the server, you have a responsibility to make sure people aren't overserved and then leave and do something tragic.
Right. And I totally get her anxiety. But one of the things that we know fails is telling someone who has an alcohol problem what they can and can't do. Like, we're not going to make someone who has an alcohol problem not drink.
Right.
We want to give them the conditions possible to help them. We want to give them, we want to minimize the probabilities, but we can't be controlling about it too. They could choose not to serve alcohol. That's actually a totally legitimate choice.
Absolutely.
We decided to have a dry wedding.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or
you can do
only
that.
Only champagne at the toast. We're going to come around. We're going to give you one glass and cider for the kids. Okay.
Like that's a legitimate choice, because it's the difference there is, if I choose not to serve alcohol at my wedding, I'm choosing to not serve alcohol at my wedding. I'm not telling you what you can and can't do. And I think there's again, we often talk about this issue of, and I love the way you framed it, is a boundary is something I set for me, and what I will accept. A boundary is not something I set for you. You had a better way of saying it than that, though.
Oh, yeah, no, a request is something that I can make of you. I request that you don't overindulge in alcohol, right? But a boundary is within my control.
Right. Now, if you're drunk at my wedding and you're being a dick, then I'm going to invite you to leave, or I'm going to have someone designated probably to invite you to leave if you're being a dick.
Yeah.
Certainly that's fine. That's entirely appropriate.
Yeah,
I don't want to call her bridezilla. I think in her zeal to avoid potential problems at the wedding, she potentially created a problem that's really unfortunate and could have been avoided with a more respectful way of putting things. The person, if there's someone really, if, as you say, Uncle Tony is plans on getting hammered at the wedding, Uncle Tony's going to get hammered at the wedding, regardless of what guardrails you try to set up. Let's be reasonable about it. Michael,
Gayle,
what did the internet say?
Well, wait, Gayle, do you agree? Are you totally
I'm sorry. I thought Gayle said
with Dan's official ruling?
Oh, is that your, yeah. I mean, I think Dan said it really well. I think we're on the same page. I think I don't think she needs to be called bridezilla. I generally don't like that term.
Really sexist.
It is really sexist, because I think we know that in this case the alcohol problem runs in the groom's family, but it may be the groom going, look, I don't want Uncle Tony getting fucked up at our wedding, right? And so it may be the groom that's imposing this, and we don't use the term groomzilla. So anyway, that's an aside. I do agree with Dan. I think this is, again, I go back to the word overreaching. I understand the fear, and we've talked a number of times about the anxiety that is created in any given situation, and how you act in service of that and create avoidance, and it's not necessarily reflective of the real scenario here. But I do find it problematic how she tried to assuage her anxiety and to calm it, and I think it will do nothing but actually create more angst. Not just
it sounds like
family feedback, but in the day of, because now she's in a position to be monitoring, or he, are both of them are in a position to be monitoring everyone's alcohol use. Are they following the rules? And that's just going to suck the joy out of their day so quickly.
I'm not willing to call her an asshole,
Mm-mm.
but I really like your word there. This was an overreach.
Yeah. I don't even know that she sucks. I just overreach.
No,
The only
I
word I
think
have for her.
it comes from a place of anxiety and from a
Mhm.
place of worry. And it's an overreach, but I'm just not willing to call her an asshole. But Michael, what'd the
Well,
internet say about her?
Asshole, by the way, would be coming by the table and grabbing, nope, that's your third drink, and you got that drink ticket from Aunt Martha. That's mine. I'm pocket like that's asshole.
For me, like I hearing you guys talk about it, I mean, what it seems like to me is sometimes I fall down these like, oh, this plan will work perfect. It'll be like this and that and blah, blah. And like, I really need someone to like workshop that idea with it, which is why
Mhm.
Gail is such a wonderful partner that way, because she's often like, maybe there's a better way. And so the internet kind of echoed that of like, there are lots of better ways here. You could have a dry wedding. You could, that seemed like that was the universal, like, why don't you just not have alcohol or have it at the champagne toast, like you had mentioned. But I'll say at the end of the day, almost everybody on the internet called her an asshole because of the overreach, because of the rules. There are a couple that I captured the posts because they're kind of funny. Your ticket plan went from moderately novel to aggressively controlling the more you explained it. Are you going to have a security guard tackle Aunt Joan if she gets out of her chair with a glass of Chard in her hand? Um, Weird wedding. Better control the food intake too. You don't want your obese family member to get too much food. Your title is misleading. It's okay to have not to have an open bar at the wedding, but these kind of restrictions are insane. And the only people that called her not an asshole were people who identified as alcoholics, which were kind of interesting. They all said, your system for control is never going to work. I'm an alcoholic. I would bring my own flask. I would drink beforehand. The things that you hope to avoid, unfortunately, my disease is going to cause me to undermine in ways that you'll never anticipate or predict. So, go with the two ticket system, go with a dry system, but don't try to tell me where I can and can't drink or anything. There's ways around everything that you're trying to put forward. And the more rules, the harder we'll fight against it.
I really like that self-identified alcoholics response. That's a really great response.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for another riveting debate and a glimpse into the collective conscience of the internet. As we find out, things aren't just black or white. They're often more in the gray.
And I'll go with truth is stranger than fiction. And this one was strange.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this one's an interesting one for sure. Thanks so much for bringing this one forward. And I always stick around for the bonus conversation. Like, follow, share.
Yeah. I'll do it for you, Dan. Please follow and share Veritas Views on any of the podcast platforms with your neighbors and friends. And as Dan already said, stick around for the bonus conversation. This time it's going to be about food. I'll see you on the other side of the credits.
You can follow Dr. Dan Kessler at Dr. Dan Kessler and Dr. Gayle MacBride at Dr. G. MacBride. Oh, and you can find them both at veritaspp.com. Credits. Tickling the Ivories, Matthew Reddington. Art, production, and design, bringing this show together with flair and finesse, Michelle Love. Recording and editing, turning chaos into something worth sharing, Michael MacBride. Intro, outro, I'm Kelly Buttrick, a VO talent who just happens to be Dr. MacBride's cousin. Cats, CJ, Linus, Sadie, and Griffin. Hosting by whomever lost the coin flip. Interruptions by all their children. The content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Listening to this podcast does not constitute a therapist-client relationship. If you believe you may be experiencing a mental health issue, please seek the assistance of a qualified mental health professional. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis, you can call or text 988 from anywhere in the U.S. to be connected to Crisis Mental Health Services.
Thanks for listening. As promised, here's the bonus conversation. So one of the things we were kind of talking about were quick things that you can do in the kitchen. We all love food. Dan, we've come over to your house and we've thoroughly enjoyed food at your house. And it's always kind of fun to see what kind of things you put forward. But I'm wondering, and I'll ask Gayle this as well, what are some things that you can put together at a moment's notice? Like you're like, oh shit, I don't have a dinner plan. What's your go-to dish that you could make?
Oh, me first?
You first.
Throw rice in a rice cooker, cut up some tofu, cut up some broccoli, roast both of those things. Gochujang, which I have like an enormous supply of this stuff. Sesame oil, soy sauce, sugar, boom.
Done.
Amazing dinner. You have to wait for the rice to finish cooking, but the entire thing is like 5 minutes of preparation.
Wow.
That's my go-to meal. Oh, a little peanuts, some peanuts sprinkled on top.
Ooh. All right.
That's my go-to meal. I make that meal.
dinner.
I make that meal once a week.
And you think the rice cooker is worth it? Because I don't believe we own a rice. I guess actually our pressure cooker probably does rice cooker, but
rinse the rice a few times, throw it in the rice cooker, push a button, walk away. It comes out perfectly. I'm 100% behind the rice cooker. Use mine a few times a week.
Awesome.
Nice.
And Gayle, I should know this, but what is your go-to?
Oh, you absolutely know this. And I would say it's not as fast as Dan's, but really when you shop these days, you can get some pre-chopped vegetables. And so if we go that route and we open these bags of pre-chopped vegetables, I always throw onion on there on a sheet pan, throw it in the oven, roast the vegetables. And I just always have pesto on hand. And so Dan, I actually probably lifted this from your book. You would put pasta with it, but honestly, I throw garbanzo beans in and it's roasted vegetables, garbanzo beans and pesto. Sometimes if I'm feeling really sassy, I'll put a soft cooked egg on top, just like a fried egg, but just where the yolk isn't set. And yeah, that's dinner for me.
There you go. Two dinners, under 10 minutes each, I think, in prep time. Although there's a wait time for both.
Well, there is. And quite frankly, if you've got to pre-chop the vegetables, then, maybe that goes out the window, but I think there are some ways to do it really efficiently. Yeah. And, both of these are really nutritious. And, Michael and I were having a conversation the other day where they talked about, because you've identified as vegan. I used to say I'm flexitarian. I probably still will say that. But there was a phrase that I sort of liked, which is having a diet accented with meat. So rather than being meat forward, we sort of accent with meat. And so this is one of those vegetarian dishes for us.
Totally down.
Yeah. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. Tune in again next week for another exciting Am I the Asshole debate.
We love hearing from you, so please review us on Apple, Spotify, or, well, wherever you're listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please review, like, and follow. Also, give it a share. This helps us reach more listeners.